Some things to consider. I mentioned deep neural networks. They're great for images, speech, and to a certain extent text, so taking unstructured data and turning it into structured data, but they are inherently opaque. If you remember, there was input layer, output layer, and then in the middle, hidden layers. They are essentially hidden. You could actually probably write out all the math, but it would take up all of these walls. But you really, if you need to show your work, if you need to show how you arrived at a decision, I always think of banks and deciding whether or not to extend credit to someone. You probably can't use a deep neural network, so keep that in mind. Second, and you probably are aware of this example, these models are only as good as the data used to train them. I just published a report on the ethical implications of AI and how bias can unintentionally seep into artificial intelligence and the algorithms or the models that are the brain of these systems. This is a notorious example because Microsoft was really happy to unleash Tay on Twitter and have users interact with Tay. Now, as you all know, we don't, as a species, really put our best foot forward on Twitter. And so Tay soon, within 24 hours, became what the Telegraph in England called a Hitler-loving sex robot. So Microsoft had to take Tay down. And since they've tried to make adjustments and retried this with a little bit more success, but still not completely successful. So you have to be very careful in what you're feeding into these systems, and you have to absolutely continuously monitor, especially if the systems are continuously learning from new data. And finally, I think that the most common failure today when it comes to AI is just trying to do too much. With AI, these systems are really good at taking on very narrow tasks, but when you try to create something akin or close to pure or general AI that could interact with people and hold different topics and streams of conversation in their head, it's going to fail. And I know Facebook is here, but this happened last year. It became apparent that the Facebook Messenger bots hit a 70% failure rate, meaning that only 30% of inquiries were actually able to be completed or resolved by the bot. The other 70% had to go to humans, and that's because they had kind of this grand design to be able to develop a conversational platform to handle any situation. But unfortunately, it lacked the ability to understand context, to hold different conversational streams at the same time. For instance, up here you see, do I need a jacket? The bot fields that question, well, yeah, it's chilly outside. But then if the person just asks the word sunglasses, the bot was unable to retain the thread of the previous conversation. And so it made a little joke like, you gotta wear shades. So now Facebook has decided to focus on a narrower set of use cases so users aren't disappointed by the limitations of automation. So here are some of my recommendations when it comes to thinking about these technologies. The first thing is, don't do AI for the sake of AI. It's bound to end in failure. There are some problems, business solutions that are particularly suited for artificial intelligence. There are some that aren't. There are some that rules-based systems will be able to handle quite well, actually, and be much simpler and less expensive to implement. Start with a business problem or a business objective. Are you trying to win more customers? Are you trying to grow the lifetime value of the customers that you already have and nurture loyalty, improve the customer experience, stave off customer retention? All of those things are places to start. And then before you start thinking, okay, now I know that, like, let's turn to AI, actually turn to your data and take a careful inventory of your data. Data is the lifeblood of artificial intelligence. As we saw, some of these technologies are more data hungry than others. So it behooves you to understand the data that you have that you can use to potentially train one of these systems. If you're in a data sparse environment, you're probably gonna have to go with something that's more pre-trained. If you have a wealth of data, building an AI system on your own data is always better than something that's more generic. So I would recommend going that route. Select a narrow use case. based on the overall feasibility and try to prioritize based on what you expect the overall business impact to be. Yeah, the build versus buy thing. So a lot of folks aren't lucky enough to have machine learning specialists, data scientists, especially folks who understand deep learning. I mean, I used to do this stuff, and I've never used a neural network before. If data scientists are unicorns, those people are like Pegasus. They're very, very rare. So if you don't have the skills, you may have to buy a solution for your narrow use case. Continuously measure to make sure that the system is performant and to make sure that it's not going off the rails like Tay did, and measure success. Like Robert was talking about yesterday, I mean, with OKRs, I think it's really important before you even start the project to determine, okay, what is the metric of success? You know, what are we, is it, you know, are we looking to grow our customer base? Are we looking to grow customer lifetime value? Is it some sort of decrease in attrition, or maybe a higher NPS score? Figure that out ahead of time and then communicate that across the business, because if you do this right, you will succeed with your goals. You really have to then take that, champion it across the business and say, you know, this is what AI did for us. And I had one other slide that didn't make it in here, but I want to mention, you know, people say, okay, Brandon, this is great, all of this is possible. Are people actually using AI? So according to Forrester's research, we survey like 4,000 global and technology decision makers globally. 52% of companies are currently investing in or using AI in some capacity, and another 20% plan to in the next 12 months. That's very high. I was shocked by that number. But when you look at the geographic breakdown, Asia is like 61 or 62% have already implemented AI. North America is down around 52%, and then Europe is considerably trailing that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of data that's available.